right, those that are online on the live podcast, go ahead and click on week 4 check-in, post your name, and then join the live chat on the link there on number 3 on the top of our webpage. You'll click on that link and submit your full name, and just post hello when you get on. It looks like Garrett's in. We'll get started here in a few minutes. Okay, those just joining, make sure and go ahead and click on week 4 check-in, post your name, and in order to chat, you can click on the live link on number 3. You can even click on that from your phone, or might be easier to have 2 screens versus the live podcast on one screen and the chat on the other might be easier. If you are chatting in YouTube, I do have that up and going as well. Looks like Yaz is in there. That's fine. Got a few more to join, so when everybody joins here in a few moments, we'll get started. We're going to go over man in the middle attack and the process of that. Hopefully next Thursday, we'll do our face-to-face lab. We will do this at the first part of the lab and continue our one that we had for next week's schedule as well. So we'll do 2 labs next Thursday. And we might even do this lab on Tuesday, the live man in the middle attack, possibly, depending on how much time, how long, quick it takes me to go through the discussion next Tuesday. But tonight we're going to discuss man in the middle, what it's all about, how it works, and then prepare us for the lab. Also in week 4 lab, just so you'll get the points, even though we're not technically doing the lab this week, we will be doing it next week. Go ahead and submit your name in week 4 lab. So you're submitting your name in the check-in module in the week 4 lab. You're joining us on the chat, which is on the top of the homepage, number 3 on top of our homepage, where it says join live chat at. You can also join live chat on the YouTube live link if you want to. One or the other. You don't have to do both chats, just one. I prefer the one on number 3. Just it's easier for me to view that. All right. Wait a couple more minutes here and then we'll get started. Those just joining, make sure and go ahead and click on the week 4 check-in, submit your name, and the week 4 lab and submit your name. We're going to be going over man in the middle attack and how that works here in just a bit. All right, I got a few others that just joined. Make sure those just joining to go to week 4. Click on the check-in module, post your name. Also the week 4 lab, post your name. And then join the chat on number 3 at the top of our course where it says join live chat at. You can join that live chat on your phone if you want to, and view the podcast on your computer if it's easier for you. You can fit both on one screen if you have a laptop, but you might do however you want to do it. All right. Well, those are still joining. I'm going to go ahead and go over this week's assignments. All right. So you got a week 4 quiz over chapter 4, lab. We're going to do partially tonight, partially next week, and review questions. All right. Let's go ahead and go over the discussion for tonight, which is man in the middle. And yeah, as I see you in the other chat room. I see you. All right, cool. Those who got one to just join online, make sure and click on your week 4 check-in and week 4 lab. Post your name. We're going to go over man in the middle now and what it's all about. And next week, either Tuesday or Thursday, either one, we will do the man in the middle lab, hands-on lab, or have you come into class and I'll have everybody log on to Facebook. You'll think it's Facebook, but it's a fish page, and show you how easy it is for hackers to set up a man in the middle of attack and get passwords, username and passwords from those in that attack. So what a man in the middle attack basically is you have a hacker somewhere in an environment that will come in, and you think you're talking to your bank or your social media account that you're on or your website that you're visiting. But the man in the middle traffic is going through in this case, a hacker setting up a rogue system to infiltrate and filter, really not infiltrate, but filter that traffic. So users on a man in the middle attack generally don't see any activity, any weirdness. You will when we do ours, because I do it on purpose, kind of in your face type of thing. But normally they won't see anything odd. The reason for that is when you're in a man in the middle attack and you're the victim, it can be done 2 ways. One is they can, like we're going to do in our lab, you can actually phish a website to purposely collect username and passwords, is what we're going to do just because of time's sake, we do that. Or you can do a man in the middle attack that just looks for pure data of all the activity folks are doing on that attack, during that attack. So you're going to collect all their websites they visit, any clear text messages that they type in their computer or their phone. It will be collected. It can even determine and crack past certain passwords that are collected as well during that attack. Once an attack is finished, hackers can then take that data and pull from it information that they need. It's been proven that most people, and this is how they do it on phish websites, like we're going to do it on the Facebook page, man in the middle attack. We're going to have it to where you fail on purpose. Regardless of what your username and password is, I'm going to have you use a bogus one next week. It fails, it goes to a failed page, failed login page, and then attempt to log in again. Hackers know that if they set up a rogue site to where, regardless of what the password is you put in, username and password is, it goes to a failed page. Within about 2 to 3 minutes, average users will use every username and password that they know that they use within that time frame to get into that account. So once the attacker comes back with that data, they can use that information, those username and password information, in tandem with all of the website data they've gathered from your computer during that attack, as far as history of your websites you visit, and use that to try to infiltrate your bank, credit card information, credit card attack, account information, and such. So that's basically what it is as far as the layman's terms. Technical definition is basically a form of eavesdropping where communication between two users is monitored and modified by an unauthorized user. And really, a lot of times it's not modified, it's just viewed. That data is viewed. Perspective. Generally, the attacker actively eavesdrops by intercepting a public key message exchange and transmitting that message while replacing the requested key with their own. 9 times out of 10, though, it's basically just idle, passive listening to data as it comes across the network. Once the attack is done, they can then take that data load, that data payload they've retrieved from that attack, and then do the dirty work later. And so normally within the attack itself, even though it can be done like this, where they try to intercept or modify packages or key messages, public key messages, generally it's in my opinion, what I've experienced as far as using rogue access points and man-in-the-middle attack from as far as labs that we've done to conferences we've went at to learn how this is accomplished, is to hackers that actually do this on a daily basis. Most of it's passive reading or passive listening to the data coming across. And again, the user's not going to really know that they're even in the middle of that attack. And you might be thinking, well, how do people, how's that happen? Well, if you're in a Wi-Fi hotspot area, like say a Starbucks or any place that offers free public Wi-Fi, that's a prime fertile ground for man-in-the-middle attack. As you know, when you go into those locations, a lot of times they'll have like a screen that'll pop up that says whatever store you're in or company you're in. It'll have that screen up saying, here's some free Wi-Fi. Thank you for visiting our store, and have some ads on there about the store, and click continue to go in. Well, hackers can mimic that very easily, or not, and you just go into that hotspot area and click on because the attacker is generally closer to you than the access point in the business. He or she will have that same SSID set up on their computer. And the way computers work with SSIDs and Wi-Fi connection, if you've been on that connection before, that same SSID name, it's going to try to connect it to the closest possible one, the strongest one, which in this case is going to be the hackers. So even if they don't do the page, or try to mimic that page or phish that page, most users aren't going to be aware of it. They're going to browse the internet like they normally do, go do activity on their computer like they normally do, and during that whole time, the computer that the hacker is using for that man-in-the-middle attack is now gathering all that traffic and all that data for that traffic. So man-in-the-middle attack is also known as bucket brigade attack, fire brigade attack, monkey in the middle attack, session hijacking, TCP hijacking, or TCP session hijacking. The origin is derived from the basketball scenario where two players intend to pass a ball to each other, while one player between them tries to seize it. Man-in-the-middle attacks are sometimes referred to as bucket brigade attacks or fire brigade attacks. Those names are derived from fire brigade operation of dousing off the fire by passing buckets from one person to the other between the water source and the fire source. So the way it works basically is the session hijacking occurs and to the general public as hijacking. The attacker's primary target is specific data, transactions, data flow. Could be anything from email to a bank transaction. The hackers began investigating that part of interest. And so when you log in to that rogue access point, an example, is one way. The other way is using software like Cane Enable. Cane Enable, the way it works is everybody's on the same Wi-Fi access point. We'll say the hotspot within Starbucks or within a McDonald's or wherever. And they use a software like Cane Enable that basically does what's called ARP poisoning. And what it does is that whatever the IP address is of the real router that people are connecting to, the ARP poisoning will make that IP address point to, instead of the router going through the traffic when everybody connects to it, going to the man-in-the-middle computer. So let's say that the router IP address is a 192.168.1.1, and the hackers is a 192.168.1.200. Cane Enable will take the .1, and all traffic will then poison the ARP table to where all traffic, instead of going to the actual router, will be rerouted to the .200, which is a hacker's computer. And we'll see all that traffic as it goes through. So you've got a valid website you're going to, or you think you're going to, and you are going to, and you see that data. The man-in-the-middle attack is in the middle, and the person's on the left. And you go to your bank account. You log in, do your transactions, log out. Nothing seems weird. But all that time, the man in the middle, the computer, is gathering data in a database. Cane Enable has a database it gathers it in. There's other softwares out there that does the same thing. Cane Enable is probably the most popular, been around the longest. And that's the one that we'll use in our example lab that we'll do next week. Total setup time for man-in-the-middle attack with Cane Enable, once you have it, once you know how to use it and configure, is about 3 to 4 minutes. Can be totally set up. A hack generally lasts on a man-in-the-middle attack anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, and then the hacker will leave with that data on the laptop to disseminate that data and to go through it later to hack accounts. That's why it's real vital important, I believe, because this can happen to anybody. No one is, I guess, immune from this happening to, because you have no idea that this man in the middle is occurring, because there's no weirdness going on here when you're connected and you're getting your data, and the data is not, even if you have antivirus and you have anti-spyware on your computer, it's not going to notice any weird about this connection. It's the real connection. The difference is the flow of, instead of this data going through, instead of, we'll pretend over here is a router, instead of it going through a router or a server, is going to that man in the middle computer. So here's what a physical view of one looks like. You've got a sender or a router. In this case, a router, we'll say, could be in a hotspot area like a Starbucks or whatever. The laptop connects to that router like any other normal user, with special software to do some type of poisoning, some type of ARP poisoning to get the data. So in our lab, what we're going to do, basically, instead of doing it over wireless, which is done a lot of times in a hotspot because that's what hackers are using their laptop, it's done the same way over wired, okay? Because basically, as this definition says here, on performing it over wireless or wired, either one, it's which an attacker is able to read and insert at will messages between two parties that they've been compromised. And so, like when we do the lab, what we'll do is everyone will come in. I'll have you go to facebook.com. You'll access a phished web page or a fake facebook.com web page. You put in a bogus username and password. You'll go to a failed login page. You'll put in another bogus username and password. I will turn off the attack. then you will come over to my computer and I will show you all the data that was collected. Now, once a hack is turned off, um, the user in a phished website example would then, if they did anything else on that Facebook page, it would then refresh to the real Facebook page. And if the phished website is done professionally and it looks a lot like the current Facebook page, the end user is probably not going to know any different. They're going to just think, well, I forgot my password or I typed something in wrong or whatever the case may be. And so they're not going to know anything. But in the meantime, the hackers now received every known username and password that user has knowledge of and has used. And maybe that they've used in the last 5 years. I don't know. Again, depending upon the person, normal people will, on a failed password, put in every password they think they've used or think they know they've used on that account, which, sad to say, a lot of people use the same username and password scenario on multiple accounts. And so with that knowledge, an attacker or a hacker can basically take that information with your browsing information, the browsing data they have on your computer now from that attack, and try to log into those other accounts with those username and passwords. And they might be successful, might not be successful, but a lot of times they are, and can empty out bank accounts, charge up card information, things like, you name it, can be done. So one of the examples it talks about here on doing it, like if you were to do this from home, which can be done after we do our lab, you can try to replicate it at home. You really technically, don't have to do it the way I'm going to talk about tonight. This is one way to do it. We're going to use a software called K-Enable, but in this one example here, they log into the Wi-Fi router and get in, change the SSID, change the default username and password to log in and enable the WEP with one key. It says here channel 6 was used instead of channel 11 because the router is firmware routed to 6 only. Then it says we're able to see and connect to the network they've configured for this test. Turn on MAC filtering and clone the known computer and allowed it. Then how it works. Man in the middle poisons the ARP cache of a victim. And on their computer now, instead of pointing to a .1, it points to whatever the IP address is of the man in the middle machine. So the victim thinks that their hacker's ARP address is a gateway's address. The gateway thinks the hacker's ARP address is a victim's computer, and all data is directed through that listening system. So when that person goes to any website, all that traffic from that website goes through the attacker's machine to that person's computer. Again, on most instances, they're not going to notice any weirdness, especially if the attack doesn't last long, which it generally doesn't. The longer the attack lasts, by the way, the more likely things can get slow or choppy or data drop or whatever. Now, there are systems in place, by the way, on a server end that can block ARP poisoning by looking at the ARP tables on a computer or computers on your network. And if it sees that ARP tables are changed dynamically, it can block ports from that computer. And so there are some hardening tips that can help do that. And there's a lot of software out there and hardware that allows us to determine if ARP poisoning is occurring. And then what it does basically is shut support down to that computer to where they can't have any internet or network activity. So basic attacks would read all clear text information passed between the hosts. So going to a website, putting in usernames and passwords possibly. Then what that man-in-the-middle attack does is trap that data. And the more packets you get, more packets an attacker gets on a man-in-the-middle attack, the better. Because that's just more data that they can use later through data dumps to determine what data they've collected. So a lot of times they'll do what's called packet injection, where you're basically on purpose creating activity on a network on purpose to create activity of traffic, more traffic flow. And so packet injection is an option that is well used. And you can do packet injection through a lot of different tools where you're literally sending packets to a computer in hopes that you're getting more data packets back from a computer. You can also do what's called an advanced attack, which your traffic blocking is where you deny web pages. With DNS, with ARP poisoning turned on, you can then what's called do DNS redirecting, meaning an attacker can type in any address, any common address, whether it be a bank account, bank URL, a social media URL, and redirect it to a phish page, or they could redirect it to a fake 404 page to make the user think that this site's down. But on that page might be a link that says, click here to reset your account or something, and enter in your real username and password, and ergo now they have your valid username and password. Filters, as I've mentioned already, listening for any data, any file signatures, any data signatures, and changing it. Breaking encryption, crypto roadblocks, and deauthorization, where basically tools like Kane can decrypt encrypted files that have maybe passwords or authentication files. Host AP is an example that can be used to create a rogue access point that clients will authenticate with, much like ARP poisoning, but it's more obvious to admins. Other man-in-the-middle attacks can use Host AP to de-authenticate the client and force it to re-authenticate with themselves on a different channel. And in this case, we're talking about Wi-Fi still. SSL connections on protection can prevent you from connecting to man-in-the-middle unless the attacker sets up a secure SSL man-in-the-middle attack, which is easily done, by the way, which we'll talk about next week. If you're a programmer, you can do this yourself by creating your own SSL certificate to where when you go to secure web pages that you have phished, it shows that certificate. And read certificates carefully, before connecting, like file encryption, any file you don't want it intercepted. WEP won't work at all because the attacker can tumble through your data and find the key easily because it's in clear text with WEP, even though it is possible on a Wi-Fi hack to crack a WPA2. It just takes longer. And then sniffing. It's easiest. This is the most common, the easiest attack to launch. All packets, they call full routing ARP poisoning. Everything that's happening on those computers connected on that network going through the man-in-the-middle computer are being transmitted through the attacker. All the plain text protocols, all the websites are being sniffed. Any username and passwords that can be had as being collected. User activity, browser activity, all of that's being collected and put in the proper locations in a database. So later the attacker can look at, and we'll see this when we do the lab next week, you can look at what was collected FTP, what was collected HTTP, what was collected Telnet, what was collected username and password, what was collected URLs, what was collected this, that, and the other. You'll be able to see it all broken down by category. Hijacking, again, this is easy to launch. It isn't blind. The attacker knows exactly the sequence numbers, the exact sequence of the TCP connection, because they are the ones hijacking that data. And the way hijacking works is any secure website that you on or generally has what's called a sequence file, a sequence URL that's attached to a URL. It can then attacker can take that and push back to a computer where they think it's from an authenticated, secure website from a phished website. Injecting is where a possibility to add packets to already established connection. This is only possible in full duplex connection, like I talked about earlier. Full duplex is where basically you're seeing all data from all traffic from that computer going through the man-in-the-middle attack. The attacker can modify the sequencing number, keep the connection synchronized while injecting packets themselves, or just let it idly sit there and do what's called a proxy attack. Um, and basically what you're doing there is collecting data to use later. Filtering, the attacker can modify the payload of packets by recalculating the checksum, create filters on the fly. The length of the payload can then be changed, but only in full duplex. DNS spoofing I talked about earlier. This is where the attacker the user thinks they're going to a certain website, can then reply and return back to the computer that asked for the phished website that the attacker wants them to see. So instead of going to serverx.localdomain.com, they now come back as it should be with maybe a 10.1.1.50, now come back with a 10.1.1.1. So that's the discussion on man in the middle. What we're going to do Thursday, and this is or next week, we'll probably do this Tuesday. I think we'll just go and do this Tuesday when you guys come in. This was a slideshow we just did. This link here is going over the download file that we'll be using, or the document we'll be using, I believe, with Kane. I'll open that up to make sure. Yeah, this one will be, no, this is the one actually on password cracking with boot disk. Walks over process of how to do that. We will not be doing this one in the classroom, but I just threw that one in there because it's another one to do. And it does use Kane enable on that one as well. Let me get out of that. Kane is the software that we'll be using. I recommend if you do this at home, I recommend during the demo attack, the demo hack that you'll do in the classroom, when you try to download this from a website or something, a lot of times your antivirus will catch it as something that, because it's a well-known program that's used by hackers to penetrate testing, also for man-in-the-middle attacks. So a lot of times I tell students, if you're going to do this as a demo at home to play around with it, probably turn off your antivirus for a moment in your firewall to download it at least, and then install it, and then you can turn everything back on. This document here is a good read on hardening your Windows passwords. I recommend looking at it. This document here is one of the ways to hack passwords on a Wi-Fi access point is what's called rainbow table hacks. And rainbow tables basically are a huge list of well-known passwords that can be downloaded and then used in a rainbow attack. And I'm not going to let it load all the way because it's taking forever. And then Sparta. Sparta is a penetration testing tool. And penetration testing tool that's really popular for testing your network for its strength or weaknesses in attacks. And it has things like Nmap that causes you to look at all the traffic on your network at one point. You can also get quick results from Nmap. You can run any script or tool on a service across different hosts with a click of a mouse. You can automate tasks. For an example, you could run an HTTP service, a scan, a denial of service, trial. You could do a default credentials check for most common services. to make sure that everything's configured correctly and people have their passwords are secure, meaning the length of their passwords and things of that nature. Identify password reuse on the tested infrastructure to where you can literally see how many people are reusing or using passwords on this system. Ability to mark hosts that have already worked on, you've already worked on, so they don't waste time looking at another one. Website screenshot taker, so you don't waste time on less interesting web servers. So Hydra is a very popular, or Sparta is very popular. And then these documents here, the next document is Kali. Kali.org is a website that you can download, and tons of free tutorials on penetration testing and how to do penetration testing with Kali. We will be doing some penetration testing down the road, but I just thought I'd throw a lot of stuff at you on this week because we're talking about accessing people's computers, starting to talk about penetration testing this week. And the next one is a Sparta website on a really good tutorial on Sparta and how it works as a testing tool. And I recommend that as well. It goes through a whole bunch of different ways to use it and a real easy way to do it. And then this next one's a Sparta one as well. So we went over the slideshow tonight. Next week, we'll go over the hands-on man-in-the-middle attack. You will have a handout for that one, as well as software. The software I'm going to give you is going to be burned onto a CD or DVD. But you will more likely want to transfer it to a USB drive. Questions on man in the middle? All right, doesn't seem like there's any questions. So remember, next week, next Tuesday, we'll do a man in the middle lab along with a discussion for chapter 5 or for week 5. And let me look ahead at next week, next Thursday, what we're doing for a lab then. Next week, I have slated man in the middle. Good. Cool. I did move that. All right, great. So man in the middle we'll do next Thursday. And tonight we just talked about a little bit more and a little bit more detail. So that was what I was wanting to do tonight anyway. We'll just do the discussion of it tonight. So that worked out pretty good. One of the things I'll talk about in the lab next week, next Thursday, is this command here. But basically what it is after we do our test demo man and mill attack, we'll run this command, and all it does basically is deletes the ARP table cache from that computer. And then what it'll do is go out to the server and start listening for all connected devices. And within a few minutes, it'll be back to normal. We'll also need to remember after we do the man-in-the-middle attack to restart our computers. One of the things you can look at between now and next Thursday as well is this man-in-the-middle ARP document, which goes in detail on more on ARP poisoning and what ARP poisoning is all about, which is one of the number one ways that hackers get into and use man-in-the-middle. So do me a favor, so I'll know everybody's disconnected and has no more questions. If you could just type in bye in the chat module. I will see everybody next week, and be careful if you are having to drive out tonight. It's very windy. I was just out in it. Very cold, very icy in different situations, different roads. Supposed to be falling branches and things, a lot of wind, so be careful. So if you could just go ahead and type in bye or see it, whatever you want to put in there. That way I know you're out. Once everybody said that, I will disconnect the live chat and also disconnect the live feed of my screen. All right? Have a good night too, Yaz. See you, Garrett. See you, Kendall. See you, Nicole. Be careful out there.